Here's a quick video on just a few little tips and tricks on how maybe we could use our calculator on an SAT or ACT when permitted, just to kind of help speed some things up. So one thing to note is on the SAT, there are two portions. There is a non-calculator portion and there is a calculator portion of the SAT. Okay, just keep that in mind. On the ACT, it is all calculator permitted, so on the entire thing. The other thing to note, the other difference I should say in the two, is that the SAT will give you a formula sheet, and I can show you what that looks like, while the ACT is no formula sheet. Okay, so it's like trade-off, right? You can use a calculator on the whole thing. They don't give you any formulas. The SAT gives you some formulas, but there's a part that you may not use a calculator on. The other difference is that the ACT is all multiple choice for the math portion, while the SAT is mostly multiple choice with a few grid in your own answers, and we'll see some of those in class, or we have seen a few of those. So notice those are just some differences between the two. So the big deal though is that we can use our calculator to help us with questions that we may be spending too much time on to begin with. So I am going to start with, I want to kind of pull my book back and forth here. And I know this one seems kind of silly, but it's a great way to start. So I'm going to bring my book in. Let's slide this down here. Sorry. So the first one, it's actually a very simple equation that we could solve by hand, but I want to use this question in its simplicity to show you how you can use both calculators, both an Inspire and an 84, to solve any equation. Okay. I'm going to start with the Inspire. I know some of us have an Inspire that we can take. Some of us have one that we own. Some of us may borrow one, and that's up to you. So I'm going to start a new document. Okay. I'm not going to save anything. Whoops. All right. So again, it's just a very straightforward solve for x. So there is a way on both calculators to ask it to solve an equation. So on this calculator, I'm going to go to Menu. I'm going to go to Algebra, because algebra, the topic there is solving equations, and number one is Numerical Solve. So I have two things I need to type in. One, I need to type in the equation. So I'm going to type in 12x equals, my equals is right below my control button, and then I have -8 parentheses 10 minus x. Now I'm not done, so don't hit enter, but at this point I've typed in the equation exactly as I see it. And at this point we need to tell the calculator to do one more thing, and this seems kind of silly, but we need to put a comma. And by the way, the comma is all the way down at the bottom. And then I'm going to tell it which variable I want it to solve for, which I know seems a little silly because there's only one variable in the equation, but this calculator is programmed to do a couple of other things. So in its simplest form, I've asked the calculator to take an equation and solve for x. Okay. Again, at this point, we could have solved it much quicker by hand, but if you're looking at an equation on an ACT or SAT that you don't know how to solve it, you don't know where to start, the solve works great. So again, I went Menu, number 3 for Algebra, and number 1 for Numerical Solve. I typed in my equation, and then I put a comma x. Okay. The downfall of the solver is if there is more than one solution, you have to go find the other solutions. So I'm not sure we'll see one of those. Let's do that here. Let's do Menu 3, 1, and let's say I want to do 0 equals x squared minus 10x minus 11. And I know there should be two solutions because this is a quadratic. And if I hit enter, it gives me one of them. So I need to go ask for the other one. So I'm going to go back up here. There is a possibility for us to type in another argument or another statement. So at this point, after that comma x, I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to pick another number like a 1. And I just picked a 1 because I picked a positive. It's just a guess, to be honest. So I said, I don't know, go look at positive numbers. So I could pick a 1, a -1, a 10, a -10. And if it's still not spitting out answers, maybe try a 100, a -100. So you can start putting in guesses there. So there's my 2 answers of -1 and 11. Okay, we can do the same thing on the 84. Okay, so I'm going to use the exact same equation here. And on the 84, I'm going to go to Math, and I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, which is easier to go up 1, to what we call the solver. Now at this point, I've used this calculator to solve an equation, so I need to change the equation, so I need to get up there to change the equation. So I'm going to arrow up, and it changes the screen a little bit. I'm going to hit the clear button. Now when you use the 84 to solve an equation, you have to set everything equal to 0. So that means I'm going to move either the 12x to this side, or I'm going to move this whole thing to the other side. Doesn't matter which one, I'll move the 12x, which means I have a -8 times 10 minus x, close that, and I'm going to subtract that 12x. So there's my equation. I have it set equal to 0, and that's not the answer. And we know that because we've already solved this equation. But what we can do at this point is type in our guess. So maybe I'll type in a 1. Now don't hit enter. When you look at the calculator, above enter it says solve. So I'm going to hit alpha, solve. And there's our answer of -20. If I thought there was more than one solution and I wanted to put in a different guess, I might put in a 10 and hit alpha, solve. It still spits out that -20. But if I were looking for other solutions, then I might start typing in some more guesses. So that's how we can use the solver on both calculators. Okay, it's something I encourage you to use if you're not sure how to solve an equation. Okay, let's take a look at this question. Turn in the page here. Oh, which one? Sorry, I'm going to need to move my book. I'll look at number 49. Again, really the goal right now is to talk about how we can best use our calculator to speed things up. So it says, which of the following expressions, if any, are equal for all real numbers x? And, you know, we can go through and come out simplifying, and maybe this is a little uncomfortable for us. To be honest, I'm going to go graph all 3 of these. And the reason I know I can graph is because there's only one variable. Does not matter which calculator you are using. I'm going to go add a graph page, and I'm going to go type in all 3 of these. I'm going to type in the square root of parentheses -x squared. That's in blue. I'm going to go type it, so I'm going to type in a new equation. I'm going to type in the absolute value. So I hit the button to the right of the 9. It's my templates button. And I have a -x. I see that it went right on top of the old graph, so I have a feeling 1 and 2 are the same. And then I'm going to type in that third one, which is negative my absolute value of x. Okay, so, and I know it's a little hard to see the colors here. I don't know if I can fix that at all. Not really. I had the blue graph first. The red graph went right on top of it, and then it came and drew this new graph. This one's black here. So this graph, this third one, is not the same as the first 2. So it says, which of the following are equal? I would say the first 2 graphs, numbers 1 and 2, which is option A, because those are the 2 that were the exact same graph. One landed right on top of the other. So again, it didn't say graph the functions, and it doesn't say y equals, but I took that opportunity to think about using a graph to answer that question. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at another question and see how we might use a calculator when we weren't really expecting one. So on this page here, I want to look at the bottom question, of course, number 12. And it says, what is the least common multiple of 30, 20, and 70? And this is one, there is a way, of course I didn't review this before we started, but there is a way to ask the calculator for a least common multiple. So let's see if we can review that here. I'm going to add a calculator page. I'm going to go to menu. If you're not sure where something is, go to menu. I'm going to go to number, and there is an option for least common multiple. Now, again, this is my fault. I forgot to review this before we started. Let's see if it'll let me type in 3 numbers. Yeah, it says too many. So maybe the first thing we'll do is find the least common multiple between 30 and 20. And then we'll find the least common multiple between that answer and 70. Okay. So again, not something that you need a calculator for, but you know, there's just one option to do that there. I believe we can find a least common multiple on this calculator. Again, my fault for starting the video before I looked at it. There it is. So again, I went to I went to math, and I went over to number, right? Just like that number menu in the Inspire. And then I arrowed down until I found that LCM. And so again, we'll do the 30, 20, the comma is above the 7. And then I can repeat that operation with a 60 and a 70. Okay. So, not that you don't know how to do these things, but maybe it will speed up some of the work as you go. Okay. All right, the next page I wanted to go to, is this one here, and I wanted to look at number 40. So, number 40, it says, what are the values of theta between 0 and 2 pi when the tangent of theta equals -1? To be honest, this is just solving an equation, but the answers are in terms of radians, but don't let that bother you. We can still go back. I'm going to just get rid of this. I started a new page, just like we did earlier. Menu, number 3, number 1. I wanted to solve the tangent, so I'm going to hit the trig button. I just like to use x's because it's easier to find. Tangent of x equals -1. And I'm going to say comma x. So one of my answers is -0.785. Well, first of all, none of these answers are negative. So I'm going to go back up. I arrowed up. I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to go change that. I'm going to go say, hey, why don't you look around +1? And there's an answer. So I would write that decimal down. So I'm going to use a little piece of scrap paper here. I'm going to write down that one of my answers is 2.356. Okay. Then I'm going to go up again, and I'm going to ask it to do that maybe around 5. And I'm just picking numbers, and it spit out 5.497 or 5.498. Now I could keep looking, and there's nothing stopping me from typing in a 2 or a 3 or a 10. Well, there is something stopping me from typing in a 10, and I'll explain that in a minute. So even if I put in a smaller guess, I still got that 5.5 number. Remember, they said find answers between 0 and 2 pi. Pi is close to 3, so 2 pi is close to 6. They're saying go look for answers between 0 and 6. And so far, I found 2 of them. So, you know, at this point, there's 2 answers there. I could look for more, but I'm going to go ahead, and we'll talk about another way we can do this, but I'm going to go ahead and take some of these, like this pi over 4. Well, if pi is close to 3, that's like 3/4. Well, 3/4 is not on my list, so I'm going to skip. And maybe I'll say, hey, what is 3 pi over 4? And there's my 2. So 3 pi over 4 is one of my answers. So now I can rule out, I can rule out letter J. And then we'll just keep doing stuff like that. So we should be able to solve a question like this with our knowledge from Algebra 2. But if we are stuck or if we are not sure and we have extra time, you can start kind of, you know, using your calculator to solve the equation and work backwards a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to keep going, but that at least gives you a good start. Okay, the other option, by the way, is to start taking these numbers and start plugging them in. Find the tangent of pi over 4. Pi, now you have to make sure you're in radians because it's not degrees, and it's a positive one, so pi over 4 doesn't work. So you could start plugging in these different numbers and ruling out your answers that way. Okay. All right. We're going to do one more out of this book here, and that would be number 49, which of course is at the bottom of the page. And it says the value of log base 5 of 5 to the 13 halves is between which of the following pairs of consecutive integers. I'm going to use the 84. Not that it matters, it just feels like I haven't used it in a while. So to be honest, you have a calculator. These are all ACT questions. You don't need to know anything about properties of logs to be able to answer this question. I'm just going to go type this in. So if I hit alpha window, it pulls up my log template. And I'm going to type in log base 5 of 5 to the, I'm going to use parentheses and type in my 13 halves. And the answer is 6.5. So they're really saying, where is this? Well, it's somewhere between 6 and 7. So instead of fumbling around with properties of logs, I just asked my calculator to evaluate, and I could answer the question that way. Okay. So there's just a few little tips and tricks, and I mean there's a lot of things we could be talking about as we prepare to take an SAT or an ACT, but don't do more work than you need to. It is a multiple choice test for the most part, so we should constantly be thinking about, you know, what are the answers that they gave us, and think about how we can work backwards, or maybe, you know, how we can shorten the amount of work we're going to do. Okay.